This all happened when I was 19. I'm not the best looking dude, so I never had much luck with women, and I ended up on Tinder. I wasn't having much luck there either until like the third month of using it. One day, a blonde woman named Katie messaged me. She was pretty enough, and I just dismissed her as a bot. It wasn't until 3 days later that she messaged me again, which was odd because bots almost never message more than once. I clicked on her chats and replied, and then I looked at her profile. What I saw was pretty generic, but definitely wasn't a bot's profile. We had been talking for like a month when she had proposed the idea that I come see her. I was pretty reluctant, as she did live like 8 hours away from me by car, but I had to admit, I really did like her quite a bit, and I had been thinking about asking her if I could see her for a while now. After a bit more badgering from her, I finally said that I would take the drive to go see her. At this point, I had no reason to doubt she was who she said she was. We had video chatted every other week and called most days, so I just assumed that I got really lucky. Things did get a little weird on the way there though. She kept messaging me, asking me where I was, and making sure that I was still coming. At some point, when I took more than 30 minutes to respond, she sent a slew of annoyed texts. Admittedly, I chalked all of this up to her being nervous about me coming to see her. I was pretty nervous too, so I couldn't blame her. I had a hard time finding a house at first. The directions she gave me were pretty confusing, and it was back through a series of gravel and dirt roads and a large thicket of trees. It was still about midday when I came onto an old-looking house. A window on the second floor was boarded up, but it didn't look abandoned, just worse for wear. Katie's red buggy that she liked to talk about was parked in front of the garage. I took out my phone and I texted her that I was here. She only sent a smiley face in return. When I got out of my car to go knock on the door, I noticed someone was looking at me from one of these second-floor windows. I found it a little creepy, but I figured it was just her father or something. She had told me that he comes to stay with her every now and again, so I ignored it and I knocked on her door. She answered with a smile and even gave me a kiss, which surprised me, and I followed her inside. We sat down on her couch and started talking about our plans when I asked her about her dad. "You didn't tell me your dad was here," I said. "Was that going to be a surprise or?" Katie looked confused and told me that her dad wasn't here. I still thought she was keeping up the act, and I told her that she didn't have to keep pretending, and that I did see him looking at me through the upstairs window. Katie went pale and said that we had to get out of there now. We both ran out to our cars, and when I questioned Katie, she informed me that her dad wasn't there, and that she had been home alone until I showed up. I called the police, and while I was on the phone giving the address, Katie gasped and pointed to the window where I had seen the guy last. He was looking at us from out the window again. I got a better look at him, and he seemed older and frail, almost like he hadn't eaten anything in a while. He left the window after he saw that we saw him. The police took half an hour to show up, and the whole time Katie was crying and mumbling about how she was an idiot for not keeping her doors locked. When the police finally did show up, one started asking me and Katie questions and the other two searched the house. They came back out a little later and told me and Katie that while they didn't find anyone, they did find that the back door was hanging open. Whoever it was had ran out into the woods, but the cops are sure that the house was empty. After the cops left, Katie asked me to stay the night because she was too scared to be in her house alone right now. I gladly did, and we slept downstairs on the couch, as Katie's bed was the room next to the one that the man had been in. Katie also brought out the shotgun that her father had given her, but she never used. I told her it was fine. The man's gone, but she insisted, saying that she would feel safer if we had it out. I'm glad she did. Later that night, I was still wide awake watching TV. Katie had somehow managed to fall asleep. From the kitchen, I had the sound of a doorknob being turned. At that point, I wasn't even scared, I was just upset. I flipped on the light in the kitchen and pointed the gun at the kitchen door. And there he was. The guy that had been in the house before was standing on the other side of the glass door. He looked shocked, and I'm glad that we had locked the door. The man unfroze and yet again ran into the woods. I woke up Katie and I told her what had happened, and we called the police yet again. When they arrived, they did a sweep of the woods and found no one yet again. They told Katie and me that it would probably be a good idea to stay somewhere else for the night. Katie and I said our goodbyes. She was going to stay at her friend's house and I was going home. I left a little after Katie did. I was on the phone with my brother telling him about what had happened. My headlights were on. As I was talking, someone caught my eye. That man was standing in the corner of the house just watching me. I gunned it out of there and didn't even bother calling the police again. But I did text Katie and she said that she was going to call them again. I don't think Katie ever even went back to that house alone. This happened to me my freshman year of college. Tinder was new at the time and everyone at my university was on the app. I joined to see what all the fuss was about. Looking through profiles, I found a few guys that were really interesting, and this one guy in particular caught my eye. We'll call him Walter. I swiped right on Walter and we matched. I was excited and kind of giddy because he was super attractive. He messages me and I got butterflies in my stomach. We messaged on the app for maybe an hour. A typical conversation is happening. I asked him what he did for a living. He asked what my major was. Harmless conversation. After a while, he asked for my phone number so we could text instead of message on this app. I gave it to him. He seemed nice enough. We messaged back and forth for a few days. Lots of flirty conversation and plans to hang out finally occurred. By the fourth day of the conversation, he started calling me babe, which gave me mixed feelings. It was cute but also a little weird. We didn't really even know each other and we had never met. But I ignored it and I continued on with the conversation. He started saying that he wanted to be exclusive and he really wanted to see me in person. He was begging me at this point to come to his apartment to cuddle and watch movies with him and his dog. I told him that our first meet needed to be in public. I would not be going to some stranger's apartment. He said that I was overreacting and kept begging. I ignored him for the rest of the night. The next day, he apologized and said that he understood we needed to meet in public, so we made plans that weekend. The weekend came faster than I expected, and it was the day that we were supposed to meet. Something just felt off and I decided to back out. I texted him apologizing, saying that my mom wasn't feeling well and that it needed me to come home to help her with some house chores. This made him annoyed, and he said, "Your mom is a big girl. If she needs you, she can call you. Just come over and you can leave whenever you go to help her. I really want to see and kiss you." I told him no, that I would be staying with my mom that weekend, and that was that. I only lived about 30 minutes from home, so I actually did go home to see my mom that day. After what he said about my mom, I started ignoring him, and then texts started rolling in. Text after text. "Babe, I'm sorry, please come over. Babe, I miss you. Are you going to come over?" I planned on replying the next day that I was just busy with my mom. But then he started calling me. I had a total of 45 missed phone calls within a 2-hour period. He left voicemails saying that he was sorry and that he just missed me and wanted me to call him back. Similar voicemails continued almost the entire time that I was home. My roommate texted me shortly after I finished dinner with my mom and asked if we could go out that night. I agreed and I went back to my university dorm. Suddenly the calls from Walter started to increase again. More texts, voicemails, and he started messaging me again on Tinder, asking why I wasn't replying to him. I wasn't planning on replying until I got a message on Instagram that said, "Why didn't you tell me you were coming back to town tonight?" Getting this message really freaked me out. I replied to him and said, "Sorry, I've been busy with my mom. How did you know I was back in town?" He said, Well, I checked your Tinder, of course. Tinder doesn't tell exact locations but has a within 1 mile message. This really freaked me out, and I messaged him back and said that he was being really creepy. He seriously had been constantly refreshing my profile to see the distance change. The messages, calls, and voicemails continued. All were him now apologizing for making me feel weird about him knowing where I was. He was just worried about me. We had been texting for less than a full week. Less than a full week. I told my roommate about it, so we decided to stay in that night. The last straw for me was getting a message saying, "Look, I'm really sorry. I'm outside your dorm with flowers and chocolates. Please forgive me." Oh, heck no. I called campus security and told them about this guy, and they never found anyone waiting outside any of the doors. I'm assuming he was in his car, waiting for me to reply. I blocked him on all socials, his phone number, deleted Tinder, and have never been back on since. I've seen him once out and about in town, but he never recognized me, thankfully. Walter, if you read this, I'm glad we never met. Thanks for making me second guess every single guy that I find attractive. I was 20 at the time and single and ready to mingle. I was studying at a school about 28 minutes away from my house, and of course I was on Tinder. Now, I've dated some older men, I'm attracted to them, so my setting on Tinder for males was always ages 25 to 40. I swiped right on a guy who looked decent enough, and he was 36. We match and he begins to message me. We go through a day or two of messaging. I explained that I'm really just looking for a friend with benefits, and he had his own apartment, about a 2-minute walk from my school. Perfect. We add each other on Snapchat and Instagram, and once he takes a look through all my photos, his way of messaging becomes strange. He starts to message me stuff on Snapchat like, "You're so beautiful, I want to hold you in my arms, you're like an angel." Now mind you, we have never met. Once he starts messaging me like this, I realize that he's not my type, especially in a friend with benefits situation. I don't need someone like that. I start to leave him on red and I ignore his messages. The next weekend, I was going to a wedding. I was all dressed up and of course I posted a few pictures to my story, which he immediately started commenting on like, "Oh my god, you're beautiful. I miss your touch. I want to feel you in my arms." I ignore him and I have a good time at the wedding. And right before the wedding started, I popped an edible. By the time I got home, it was midnight and I was very, very high and very, very sleepy. I had worked earlier that day and I hadn't napped in between. I get into bed and I start to go through my phone. I live with my family and everyone else was asleep. I start getting messages from this guy again, and I'm so high and tired that I start reading them, giving brief responses saying, "Aw, thanks." And then he messages me saying, "I think I'm gonna come to blank tonight." Blank space is the city where I live, 30 minutes away from his apartment. I respond by saying, "That's weird, don't do that," obviously thinking that he was joking. And then he says, "I want to breathe the same air as you. I want to feel you. I want to breathe with you." I begin to freak out and then he starts messaging me, "Be there soon, babe." I'm like super scared now because I live with my family and I didn't want anything weird happening. And then all of a sudden, I remember that my Snap map has location on it. I go into my map and I see my little Bitmoji and her cute outfit sitting at my house. I quickly turn myself into ghost mode, and then I see his little Bitmoji, and it's getting closer and closer to my city. I somehow convince myself that he's not joking. He's probably on his way to another city near mine, but he's getting closer and closer. It's 1:30 in the morning now. For the first time in years, I begin to pray. 10 minutes later, I check the Snap map again. Now even if you are in ghost mode, you can see if you are sharing locations with someone, although the other person can't. When I looked at my map, I was sharing locations with him. He was right outside my house. I looked out of my window and there was a car with its lights on. At this point, I'm so freaked out that my heart is inside my throat. My anxiety is through the roof, and I'm still high. I end up passing out and then falling asleep. I wake up in the morning scared. I check my phone. He had sent a few messages saying, "You have a beautiful street, baby, a beautiful home. Have a good night." I go into my mom's room to ensure that nothing had happened and she was fine. I later went to work, and after work, I went to the police station and I spoke to them. They said they couldn't do anything unless he tried to come over again, and that's when I could call the police. I went home, and for a few days I got no messages, and then at 5 a.m. on the following Tuesday, I got a message. "Even though I drove all the way to your home to breathe the same air as you, you have still not messaged me. I'm not as desperate as I seem. If you ever want what I got, let me know." Since then, I've heard from him once or twice, but I eventually blocked him. I didn't block him from the start because he knew where my house was. I was scared that if he couldn't get a hold of me, he would show up. So, creepy rando who showed up at my house in the middle of the night. Let's not meet. This story all happened in the last 3 weeks, and the final part hopefully just took place this morning. So to set the stage, I'm a single dad with a daughter who is about to turn 3. I don't really have time to go out and meet people, but I decided that I needed to put myself out there, so I made a Tinder profile. I had a few decent dates, but nothing too special. And then about 3 weeks ago, I matched with a new person. She lived about 30 minutes from me and looked cute, so I messaged her. We started talking, and she gave me her number. We texted for a week or so, and things seemed great. We both seemed to be on the same page about things, and that neither one of us wanted to rush into anything serious, but having a friend with benefits would be nice. So, we decided to spend an evening together. The first evening went well, and we got along great. We did the same thing a few days later, and again, everything went fine. But after about 2 weeks, it became clear that she wanted to start an actual relationship, and I wasn't ready to commit to that. I made that clear, and she seemed to understand and accept it. After some of the things that she said though, I was seeing some little red flags. I wasn't sure if she was going to actually respect my wishes, and not try to move things forward into a serious relationship. And there were a number of things she said that made me think she was a bit emotionally unstable. So I decided to take a few days to think about things and decide what I wanted to do. We had been texting at least a little bit every day, and I felt like the daily contact was not helping to convince her that I was serious when I said that I wanted to take things slow and not jump into a relationship. So on a Friday morning I was texting her, and then just kind of stopped replying. I didn't think much about it since I was really busy anyway. She came to my house that night, just showed up unannounced. I was polite and made an excuse about my phone being broken. She claimed that she showed up because she was worried something had happened to me, since I had always replied right away before. But her showing up at my house was another huge red flag. I figured the broken phone excuse would benefit me, giving me time to evaluate this new warning sign and decide what to do. I told her I was fine, but that I would be MIA for a bit until I got a new phone. I don't have a home internet connection either, so basically all contact with me would cease until I reinitiated. She seemed to be fine, apologizing for intruding on my evening, and left right away, so I didn't give it much thought, other than it reaffirming my concern that she was becoming obsessed. In the next few days, she sent a few messages basically just checking to see if I got a new phone. There was nothing too crazy, but it was still very worrying. And with everything else, it told me that I needed to cut things off completely. That leads me to last night. It was 6 days since she had showed up at my house and I hadn't contacted her so far. I was hoping that my silence would send a message, or that maybe she would have forgotten about me and moved on to someone else. But 'twas not to be. I went to sleep around 12 a.m. and woke up at 6. Upon looking at my phone, I saw literally like 15 message notifications, 6 missed calls, and a voicemail. The text started off saying, "I know you're probably asleep, but I saw that you accepted a friend on Facebook 2 days ago, so I wanted to know why you'd been ignoring me," and then went to pleading with me to answer the phone, and finished with, "If you won't talk to me, I'm going to come to your house." This whole thing took place between 1 and 2 a.m. The voicemail was just her sobbing into the phone and screaming, "Why are you doing this to me?" Keep in mind, I've known this girl for less than a month, and we've only been on 2 dates in that time. At this point, I was pretty freaked out, so I called a friend of mine asking for advice. My friend told me to just be blunt, and tell her that threatening to come to my house in the middle of the night was completely inappropriate, that she's acting crazy and not to contact me again. So, here I am this morning after sending her a long text, kindly but firmly telling her that her behavior wasn't acceptable, and that she was not to contact me again. So, crazy Tinder girl, let's not meet.